I'd like to pay tribute to Ann Widdecombe, who died in tragic, deeply troubling circumstances last week.
She was a colossus in public life, in political life, a legend.
She was joyful. She thought seriously about ideas, but she did not take herself too seriously. And that allowed her to reach beyond this place.
We have to be clear, we will not accept being shut down, being stopped from our duties, or being silenced in any way, because that is what Anne would have approved of.
Our democracies can only function where people have got freedom of speech and freedom to speak out and express views without fearing consequences, violent or intimidating consequences because of that.
For the third time in a decade, MPs gathered to remember one of their own who had been brutally murdered. The Home Secretary led the tributes to Ann Widdecombe.
She was one of those rare politicians who was bigger than politics. There have been so many moving tributes in the last few days, reflecting her impact both within this place and beyond politics. But I think her outlook on life is best summed up by Anne herself. Sitting on Graham Norton's sofa, she said, and I quote, "We get one go this side of eternity, one go. Life is not a dress rehearsal. You take opportunities that you like and you go for it."
In the midst of tragedy, a furious row, the state accused of failing to protect Reform MPs. Home Affairs spokesman Zia Yusuf spoke plainly on X, accusing the Commons Speaker, the government and the police of not caring at all about the security of his party's MPs. Now just look at this quietly furious response from the Speaker.
Every member of Parliament is equal in the security to me. There is no difference between any member, I want to assure you. When things are brought to my attention, because we don't discuss security, I don't put out there what is happening, what has been done, but I reassure everybody that when it is mentioned to me, it is passed on to the security people to deal with. Unfortunately, I'm sorry that people don't think I do that.
In fact, the Speaker told me a month ago, on the 10th anniversary of the murder of Labour MP Jo Cox, a tragedy followed not long after by the murder of Conservative MP David Amess, he's haunted by violence against MPs.
I'm always worried. And of course, going forward, when you've had 2 phone calls you never want, of course I'm worried. And it does keep me awake at night. You're absolutely right. And what we've got to do is try and ensure we have the best protection around MPs, the best support that I can give to MPs, and we've got to call out against the violence and threats against MPs.
MPs pointedly lined up to thank him.
I would like to thank you personally for all the work you are doing to protect MPs and those in public life. I know that as the Speaker of the House of Commons, you have made the safety and protection of those in public life your highest priority, and I would like to thank you for that.
And I want to pay tribute to you, Mr Speaker, for the way in which your office gives security support to MPs.
And can I also place on record my thanks to you, Mr Speaker, for your leadership in all that you've done over many years in making sure that we're all kept safe and secure.
But Reform is doubling down tonight with London mayoral candidate Leila Cunningham telling me this.
Well, I've seen letters that our MPs have written to the Speaker saying that they feel unsafe.
More than one MP?
I think it was more than one MP, and they didn't get a response.
Well, serving MPs do have extensive security provided by the state, but Ann Widdecombe was a former MP. The Home Secretary said today protections for politicians who have left Parliament were being reviewed. In the midst of such appalling tragedy, there is courage and a warning. Look at this from the former Conservative leader, Ian Duncan-Smith.
We have to be bold, we have to be clear, we will not accept being shut down, being stopped from our duties, or being silenced in any way, because that is what Anne would have approved of.
Yeah. Tonight, the peer and former government advisor on political violence, Lord Walney, tells me democracy itself is under threat. Well, welcome to the show then. And it was earlier today we got the announcement that the investigation into the death of former Minister Ann Widdecombe is being taken over by counter-terrorism police after new information and evidence had come to light, we're told. A 28-year-old man is in custody in connection with her murder. Our correspondent Dan Whitehead has been on Dartmoor and has this report.
Arriving at speed, this is the moment police captured the man suspected of murdering Ann Widdecombe. From the start, this has been a fast-paced investigation. Now we learn it is being led by counter-terrorism police after the 28-year-old was re-arrested on suspicion of terrorism offences.
I can confirm to the House that this man was not known to prevent. The police have cautioned against speculating about the case. That is the right thing to do for Anne's family and friends. It is also vital that the police are given the space they need to carry out their work. Today is a dark day in our political life, but we must also use it as an opportunity to celebrate Ann Widdecombe's memory.
Counter-terrorism police took the lead after new information and evidence came to light.
While the forensic work continues at Ann Widdecombe's house down here, this has become a far wider inquiry. Counter-terrorism police describing it as a complex and dynamic investigation.
The police have now established evidence of some form of motive, which has now brought about the involvement of the counter-terrorism police. The motive will have been found, obviously, during the searches and such that the police are conducting, or through interviews with the suspect, so it might not have been immediately apparent.
This is an inquiry involving multiple agencies at multiple locations, with the focus on a suspect who may have travelled some 270 miles from Rotherham to carry out the attack.
So the police came outside, undercovers, went in, had a few guns and just went in. Just got arrested him, took him away, and then they waited all night.
Saw a load of police arriving, and then forensics come in with all the white suits on, 3 or 4 of those, cornered it all off.
Ann Widdecombe's death came just a day after she appeared on TV as a Reform UK spokesperson. It has re-sparked the debate surrounding the safety of politicians.
Just for the record, every member of Parliament is equal in the security to me. There is no difference between any member. I want to assure you.
In the last 10 years, 2 MPs, Joe Cox and Sir David Amess, have been murdered. And now a former MP has been murdered as well. The threat is clearly real.
Political motivation for the murder had previously been ruled out. The head of counter-terrorism police says they are now pursuing multiple lines of inquiry to establish just why the 78-year-old was murdered. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, on Dartmoor, Devon.
Well, in the last few moments, the man who will become the next Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, has put out a post on X to describe Ann Widdecombe's murder as an appalling act of violence against someone who's contributed so much to our national life. These are concerning developments, he says, and police must be given the resources and space they need so justice can be done as quickly as possible. And I should say we have had it confirmed as well just now that Mr Burnham has received the backing of 349 out of 403 Labour MPs, meaning he will be crowned Labour leader on Friday, ahead of him becoming Prime Minister a week today. Well, Labour peer Baroness Helena Kennedy and Conservative peer Lord Ed Vaizey are on the sofa tonight. Helena, it's very a sombre mood in the Commons, as you'd expect. One MP after another standing up to talk about the sort of chilling effect on safety, really, and their concerns. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it is utterly appalling, and it's true that she was a great figure in our public life. You know, I think I share the sense of horror that there was in the Commons, and I think it's shared in the House of Lords too. I think that, you know, I know this because I once did an inquiry up in Scotland into misogyny, and one of the things was that that this happens. Threats to women are actually even greater than the threats to male MPs.
Because and you yourself have come under threat at points.
Well, that's different. Of course, I've spent my life being a criminal barrister, and I once in the House of Lords received a letter from someone that I had acted for. You know, 20 years ago, maybe longer, in a homicide, an attempted homicide case where a hairdresser had been stabbed and nearly died, and he was convicted. He was a very troubled person, and he was sent to prison. Was given quite a long sentence, And when he got out, he must have seen in the papers that I was in the House of Lords. And so a letter came to the House of Lords saying that he was going to get me, and he'd seen me talking to the prosecutor, and I was obviously in collusion with him, and that's why he'd been convicted, and so on. So I have to say that because those sort of things happen to people, I didn't immediately see the sense of threat in it until my husband said to me, yes, he may be mentally unwell, but mentally unwell people also attack people. And so I went to Blackrod, and Blackrod then put it with the parliamentary police. And I ended up with a thing in my bag that I could press if anybody seemed threatening.
Right, so security, the state-funded security was sufficient, you felt?
Absolutely. I mean, and all I would say to those, who are sort of saying we need to have better security, I've always been really the way that I was dealt with then was really very protective. And certainly I know from people who've had horrible threats of rape and so on, women colleagues in both houses, that it's always been taken seriously by security. If you raise it with the Speaker in either place, you'll find that the authorities step in and are usually helpful.
Ed, is that your experience as well?
Yes, I mean, I only had one moment, which happened, I think, shortly after David Amos was killed. So every MP's office was under a sort of obligation, if you like, to pass on any threats. And one threat that was made to me, which I think is probably the only threat I've ever faced, and it was a pathetic, it was just somebody who wasn't particularly well. So I had sort of briefly security until this man was arrested and questioned. So they do take it seriously, but it goes in waves, and there'll be another security review now following Ann Widdecombe's tragic murder. But I think one has to see this in the round. There is absolutely no doubt that the threats to MPs have changed significantly. I'm old enough.
Yeah, it's social media, isn't it?
I'm old enough to remember when Mrs. Thatcher put gates at the end of Downing Street, and there was a massive row about it, like she had some kind of imperial complex. Well, it turns out, obviously, to have been the sensible thing to do. And I do think, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I do think this social media thing is completely out of control. When I was the Minister for Technology, and MPs would complain to me, and I would complain to social media, then owned by a normal person, Twitter, I got absolutely nowhere. And it does strike me as, I think I keep saying this, we'll look back in 10, 15 years' time and think, how do we let these platforms get away with allowing this stuff to be posted?
Because it is giving a platform to people who are extremists or unwell.
They should fund a proper operation that takes the burden off the police, that allows these people to be identified and traced. I mean, 50% of the traffic now on social media are bots anyway, so we need their help to curb this kind of threat, because it intimidates MPs and politicians. But the physical threat is also real. I'm confident the police have the expertise to sift what is real and what is just bluster, if you like.
But Elena, I'm struck by the fact that Ed said he had one threat. I mean, you speak to any female parliamentarian. I mean, Penny Mordaunt, I spoke to her last week. She's had hundreds.
Yeah.
And women are more, under
women. I don't do social media, so I somehow avoid the thing. But MPs, of course, are encouraged to have, that they want their constituents to communicate with them, and they get the most incredible abuse. I mean, really, I think that if the public realised, it's absolutely horrible. And I'm sure that that it's experienced by men too, but for women, it's often very sexualised.
OK, well, we're going to discuss this more in just a second. There's so much to unpick, isn't there? But a little earlier, I spoke to Lord Walney, the former independent advisor to the government on political violence. Do you agree with Diane Abbott that the abuse of MPs is getting worse?
Absolutely it is. And Diane is off the charts, the level of abuse that she has felt. But we've seen this. We've seen a ratcheting up in recent years, and then a particular acceleration since the conflict in Gaza began. And so many MPs can feel under siege and are coping with a level of threat which is reflected in the fact that a number of them now do, or have in recent months and years, had to have the kind of close protection which in the past has only ever really been needed for senior ministers in particular security-related roles like Home Secretary and Defence Secretary.
Yeah, that's the extra protection they can qualify for. Is the extent of the threat to the point that democracy itself is under threat?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why this is so important and why there is a level of attention on it, which you would want anyway. But our democracies can only function where people have got freedom of speech and freedom to speak out and express views without fearing consequences, violent or intimidating consequences because of that.
And is that not currently the case, potentially?
Well, I think at the point of greatest concern in recent years, when there was the pressure on the UK to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, on the UK government, and there was a moment where the Speaker in the House of Commons actually decided not to call a particular vote on a particular issue because he said that he was so concerned about the security of MPs who would then be leaving.
So is the security that the state provides for MPs and former MPs, who are potentially going to get more protection now, as the Home Secretary has said, is it sufficient? Or do you understand why Nigel Farage, wanted to spend millions on his own security?
The Nigel Farage case is a particular thing, and I think that if it's hard for us really to understand exactly what's happened there unless Nigel and Reform come out and put a bit more detail on the table, because I think there certainly can be an issue where this issue of whether particular frontline politicians get the very intensive, really very expensive close protection is decided in a particular way, and it's never been quite clear what's happening there. Nigel claims one thing, but the system isn't really able to speak for itself.
Right, but I mean the system has spoken in the form of the government, the Commons Speaker today.
Yeah.
And the Reform Party's accused the government, the Speaker of the House of Commons, and the police of not caring at all about the security of Reform MPs. Now the Speaker says that all MPs are treated equally, but does Reform have a point that mainstream parties get sort of more automatic protection from the state? Is that an issue?
Well, I think the emotive way in which that was put, that's the idea that everyone is ganging up on Reform was unfortunate, is not going to be true. But there is clearly an issue where we've got this extraordinary position in politics where Reform has been leading in the polls and is looking like could well form the next government, but only has a tiny handful of MPs. And so it has politicians in senior roles who do not have that level of protection that being an MP provides.
As Ann Widdecombe.
Ann Widdecombe was one of those.
So that needs to be urgently reviewed now. People who are, there is consideration being given to, representatives of parties.
I think that is a different
That's long
thing.
overdue, isn't it? And Reform could be aggrieved by that. Is justified in feeling aggrieved by that.
Well, look. That needs to be sorted. That is a very different thing to what has been being said, is that they don't care if we live or die, you people who actually want to see us dead. I mean, I think there is... Look, I can understand why people feel angry and perhaps afraid or aggrieved in circumstances. They've just lost a loved one. So you have a level of licence, I think, a level of understanding because of that. But I don't think it is true, and ultimately it's not helpful to be suggesting that this is an ideologically motivated thing. That's not to say that there can need to be changes, but I don't think people are out to get Reform in the way that perhaps has been being suggested.
So the Reform Party should not need to bolster state security with its own donations or money to MPs and representatives.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it is genuinely the case that there is a level of threat to Nigel Farage in particular that is not being met, then yes, I would expect, you ought to expect the system to be able to adapt itself, particularly given his his position, that in one sense he's kind of a random well, he's not even a backbencher, of course, he's gone off to do the thing with Count Binface, but he has a level of profile, and clearly he does attract a level of anger and abuse and threat. Now,
he should expect the state to recognise that and act accordingly.
Yeah, that's right. Now, I think that isn't necessarily the same as Reform putting in a bill for however many Albanians that Paul Cotterill had been paying for, that the state then, taxpayers automatically say, OK, well, we'll pay for all that. But it does need to be done fairly. And I think we're in a difficult position here because normally these things are rightly kept out of the public eye because these matters are sensitive. But when it is being controversialised by Nigel Farage and Reform itself, then you do risk losing confidence in the system. So I think there is a case for having this out in the open in a way that it's not at the moment.
Were the police too quick to rule out possible terrorism in the Ann Widdecombe murder?
Well, I don't think they said that, but maybe they should have been perhaps more explicit in what they did say, because I heard them saying there is no reason to suspect.
It was pretty much ruled out, wasn't it? At an early stage.
No, look, I mean, technically there isn't. But what I think they should maybe have done, because there isn't room to suspect it unless and until you find evidence of it.
Nothing to suggest.
Nothing to suggest, which may well was, I would imagine, and must have been the case at the time. But what I think perhaps it would have been wiser to do is to be clearer to say yet. But these are early, so we're not ruling. And I don't think that message came out because everyone did just report it as ruled out. And understandably, people thought that was premature.
You were an advisor on political violence for 5 years, and that role was then abolished by the Keir Starmer government. Was that a mistake? Well,
for me, this is less about particular people in particular roles, and I've, just told them what I think in the year or so since the role was formally finished, and they can they can listen to it if they want to. What I would like to see them doing is acting more substantively on the recommendations that I made in the report, which has been sitting on ministers' desks for a couple of years. There is no
without
fix.
Any action taken on.
I mean, they have moved in some areas, but there's still clearly much more to be done. You cannot completely inoculate. You can't protect members of Parliament, anyone, from the threat of violence, particularly in this world where people can radicalise themselves so quickly. But I do think there is more to be done in, one, yes, I think physical protection measures, but two, I think we have been too lax over the years in what constitutes legitimate protest and not. I had an incident...
Well, you were accused of wanting to criminalise peaceful protest with your calls to restrict protest groups. No, but that was what... there was a row about it. But is it difficult to increase safety and security for public figures, as we've just been discussing, without jeopardising freedoms that we've taken for granted for centuries? Is that the point we're at?
No, I don't think it is as difficult as some people make out, because there's so many ways that people can protest and make their voices heard. But, for example, surrounding Parliament with an angry mob where parliamentarians were having to push through protesters and putting themselves in physical danger with angry protesters right up to jail, I don't think is striking the right balance, and it's putting parliamentarians at risk. I mean, whatever you think of them as a class of people or as individuals, actually that role is really important. And if I can, there was an ongoing issue with the Metropolitan Police and the parliamentary authorities right now over this. Many of us have, as members of the House of Lords, have offices off the estate. And you walk into Parliament. Now, there are some protesters that have worked out that that is a very good way if you want to make your point and get right up in the face of people and shout and scream at them. And that is a kind of behaviour which is too often, I think, said, oh, well, that's just people's freedom of speech. And in any other context, you'd be facing a charge of intimidating behaviour. And I think we need to draw the line more clearly.
John Woodcock, thank you very much for taking us through that. It sounds like democracy at a very perilous moment.
Sure. Thanks, Cathy.
Well, you heard mention there of those running in the Clacton by-election. Here are all of those we know that are running. Helena and Ed are on the sofa tonight. Ed, do you agree that democracy itself is under threat because of the attacks on MPs?
No, I don't. I think, as I say, I think the threat level has changed a lot. I was thinking during John's interview, you know, I used to have surgeries as an MP, never worried about them at all. If I was still an MP now, would I probably want to tell my local police where my surgeries were and possibly encourage them to send an officer? I probably would these days, actually, because you just never know when someone might turn up. But they're not... It doesn't feel to me like there's organised political violence. I think people with severe problems fixate on MPs, and it's, you know, we lost Joe Cox and we lost David Amos. It's changed. You know, I remember Boris cycling around on his Boris bike.
Boris Johnson.
When he was the mayor, and nobody batted an eyelid. Sadiq now has an armoured car Sadiq Khan and police protection, and people criticise him for it. Well, he's a Muslim mayor who's received very serious death threats, and the police have assessed his protection. I don't agree with how Reform are handling this, but I do accept John's point that if there is a credible threat against Nigel Farage and the police are able to assess it, they should give him protection if that is what they think is the right way to deal with a credible threat. But I do trust the police to assess people like that.
Do you agree that Nigel Farage could merit much greater state-funded security than he's getting?
One of the things, Cathy, that seems peculiar to me is that Nigel Farage has said that he's been given a massive sum of money, £5 million, and it's really he's given different accounts at different times, but that it's to protect him in going forward. Has he taken to the House, to the Speaker, and to the police in the way that we've talked about, the evidence? It must be based on something rather than, you know, somebody once threw a milkshake at me. It must be based on something more. If he provided evidence that he is in serious danger, the House would take that seriously. He'd be given state protection.
But he said in the past he doesn't trust the state, the establishment, to protect him adequately.
That's just nonsense. That is just nonsense.
I just don't
and
accept
every
that
MP, and indeed peers, get security advice, and as an MP you could get a grant to put security in your home. But no MP thinks they should get 24-hour armed protection.
I've been sanctioned by the Chinese, and they have at different times threatened different people, and certainly other lawyers involved with issues to do with China have faced threats from them, and. You know, you put the evidence before those in authority who can provide you with the protection. So I'd like to know what the evidence is, and I'd like to see Nigel Farage presenting it to the police. I mean, he doesn't have to show it to all of us.
Let me tell you what Reform spokesman has just said to a newspaper. This is a direct quote. Nigel Farage is the most targeted politician in Britain and the only party leader who actually goes out to meet the public in huge numbers on the campaign trail. Within days of the assassination of Charlie Kirk in the US, obviously, at a moment when the threat to public figures on the right was escalating, the security package Mr Farage was offered represented a 75% cut without clear reason. Faced with a state offer that no longer matched the threat against him, Nigel declined the downgraded and inadequate package, and Reform took the responsible decision to maintain proper protection rather than gamble with his life.
Well, I would like to see what the evidence was. He should place it before the public if he's feeling so indignant.
Yeah, but a 75% cut to his security would be wrong, wouldn't
But nobody knows what that means.
We don't know what it means.
What we're talking about in terms of what MPs get are things like, you know, potentially paying for CCTV, paying to have your door strengthened, paying for certain locks.
I had a bell put on the inside of my house. You know, there are all sorts of things that can be done. And he hasn't given us any indication at all. Right. I mean, let me tell you, putting himself on a par with Charlie, with the man...
Charlie Kirk.
Well, you can't say my life is under threat because somebody in another country was assassinated. It would be fairly simple to increase MP security in a light touch way, which is, you know, when the MP... You can tell your local police when you're in the constituency. You could have a police officer with you while you're
Let me
doing
tell you
your
what I think is
constituency
the
duties?
greatest threat to democracy.
Briefly,
right?
if you would.
The threat to democracy is money pouring in from billionaires who do not want to be regulated. They want their cryptocurrency. It's called crypto for a reason. It's secret currency. And it's the basis of lots of things are about not paying tax. It's about all those things that destroy democracies. And if we're worried about democracy, it's that. It's money coming in around the back doors.
That was worth waiting for.
Thank you.
But we'll come back to all of that because there's so much more to discuss. Earlier, I spoke to Reform UK's Leila Cunningham, who's the party's candidate to be Mayor of London. Leila Cunningham, we've been told by John Woodcock there that democracy is under threat. Has the murder of Ann Widdecombe made you feel more vulnerable as a politician?
It definitely has. I mean, I don't want it to be. I don't think violence should be a veto on democracy. And I think people should feel, safe and free to speak all their opinions. And as Ann Widdecombe once said, no one has the right to not be offended. But the problem is, I think that the political discourse now tries to paint certain politicians as beyond the pale. And I think
that's what you think's happening to Reform politicians.
I think when you have, a whole Labour conference in autumn that described us as racist, some of their ministers described us as fascists, it's definitely not helpful. An unstable person could see that, and it can put a target on our back. And listen, scrutinise.
Is that how you feel, that you've got a target on your back personally?
I mean, Ann Widdecombe was one of ours, right? She was, her views. Not all of her views, but most of her views were my views, were Reform's views. And right now, I don't want to speculate. We don't know what happened to her. But if it was politically motivated, then of course you feel more vulnerable, right?
Well, let's look at the protection that the state affords you, because Reform's Home Affairs spokesman Zia Yusuf has said, and I quote, "The state is providing no protection whatsoever. None of the government, the Speaker nor the police care at all about the security of Reform MPs." Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I've seen letters that our MPs have written to the Speaker saying that they feel unsafe.
More than one MP?
I think it was more than one MP, and they didn't get a response.
Well, you see, the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, said today in the Commons that every MP is equal on security, and he made clear that when any security matter is mentioned to him, it is passed on to the security people to deal with. Don't you owe him an apology?
I just said that they wrote to him and they didn't get a response.
But he says that, people should be assured that it is passed, any security issue is passed on to the security people to deal with.
Well,
do you not trust him to have done that?
Well, actions speak louder than words, right? So they wrote to him and they didn't get a response.
But maybe he took action behind the scenes and, passed on the concern to security. He just didn't communicate that, perhaps. I'm just speculating.
Well, lack of communication would be deemed as a no response. If I write to someone and say if I write to my boss or someone who's in charge of my security and I say I feel unsafe, can you please advise or help, and I don't get a response.
Even if he raised the matter with security and had it dealt with?
Well, our MPs were not told that. So they can't second-guess what's going on.
Right.
If they write and voice a concern and there is no response, then it is logical and objective to assume that he hasn't done anything. But if he did, then we welcome it, and it's good to hear. Perhaps he could let the MPs know what he did.
I did an interview with the Speaker almost exactly a month ago where he said he dreads being told news of another MP being attacked.
We all do. Because it's a threat to democracy.
But isn't the implication that you're sort of suggesting he doesn't care he cares less about Reform MPs than others?
Cathy, we're going on cause and effect, right? So you send someone a letter and you tell them I don't feel safe and they don't respond. What is your logical conclusion to that?
So you stand by what Zia Yusuf said?
If you wrote to the Sky people and said, I'm under threat, can you provide me with extra security? And they don't bother answering, what would be your conclusion?
Right. So you stand by what Zia Yusuf said? Do you think that was legitimate? OK. So
don't you, though?
Well, I'm not a Reform MP.
If you wrote to the bosses of Sky News and told them I don't feel safe and you didn't get a response, you'd be pretty aggrieved.
Well, the Speaker acts in a slightly different capacity. But he's got to answer that, and we'll put that to him, of course. But would you say, then, in that context, that Nigel Farage is justified in taking £5 million as a gift to fund his own security, he says? His reasons for taking it are varied, but he would be justified in that.
Of course, we've never doubted that he was justified. I speak to Nigel a lot. I know exactly what kind of threat he faces. And listen, it is it is not a nice existence to always have security. It's not a choice that anyone, I think, would want, to always have to have security around you, that you can't even walk down to the shops without someone protecting you.
But the security provided...
It's a very oppressive way of living.
No, sure. But the security provided by the state is extensive for MPs, isn't it?
I don't know. You'd have to ask the Speaker.
Well, no,
but I do know
is.
that Nigel's security was cut drastically recently. I can't.
But you know, every MP is assigned a named local police contact. There's a specialist unit within the Metropolitan Police that also works inside Parliament to monitor hate mail and death threats and so on. The House of Commons and IPSA, the Standards Authority, funds extensive security at constituency offices and homes. You know, things like reinforced doors, bomb-proof letterboxes and so on. And all MPs and staff get personal panic alarms. So the measures for existing MPs are quite extensive, aren't they, Judge?
Well,
based on
you
that?
would hope, right? That sounds like a huge array of security measures. But as we've seen, we have had, sadly, murdered MPs. So of course, it's a case-by-case basis. But, you know, you're only as safe as the next person who's as determined to get to you.
Your Reform's mayoral candidate, do you feel, then, that, you know, you get any sort of support from the state, or do you have to...
No, I mean, I've never...
You have to rely on the party?
Well, listen, I've been followed once on a bridge. You know, I've had messages saying, you know, whenever you get the chance, you should go and kill yourself. I've had messages saying, we're watching you. I have reported it all to the police. My car was actually last week damaged for no reason in front of my house. The wing mirrors were just ripped out and there was damage to it. The police have been proactive in that sense, but it's after the effect, if you know what I mean. But Reform have been very good at protecting all of us. They've... You know, it was an immediate response, and I thank them because I feel safe under them.
So do you feel personally scared, then, as a politician at this point?
Well, of course, as I said, Anne is one of ours. You know, she was a Reform spokesperson, and her views are... Most of her views are not all of them, but most of her views are our views. You know, we are an outspoken party. We perhaps speak against the consensus, you know, and we have been portrayed by elected politicians as ministers, as these racist, fascist people, you know.
But isn't the reality...
Is that a responsible way of describing someone?
OK, but isn't the reality that all MPs are coming under attack? And I'm not justifying that at all. It's an appalling state of affairs. But, you know, the Speaker's Conference report last month, for example, talked about 96% of MPs indicating that they've experienced one or more forms of abuse in their roles. This is something that applies to all MPs, isn't it?
Awful. It's terrible.
But you're suggesting that Reform MPs are singled out?
No, I didn't say that. I said, since the death of one of our colleagues and one of our own, we do feel more vulnerable because we don't know the motive, and I pray to God that the motive is not, you know, but I don't know the motive. I don't know why she was killed. Now that it's been taken on by the terrorists, I mean, I actually read what would make the terrorist unit get involved, and it is someone who has a political motive or wants to change political discourse. I don't know, but when one of your own...
There's no evidence to support...
There's no evidence.
A political motive.
No, of course not, and I'm not saying it is. But I was reading what would get the terrorist police unit involved in it. And obviously there's a multitude of reasons. But obviously when one of your own is targeted in such an awful, horrific murder, obviously you feel more vulnerable. I didn't feel more vulnerable perhaps before, but now, I mean, I don't know anyone who's ever been murdered. You know, Anne was such a lovely person, and she was a woman of her conviction. You know, she wouldn't harm a fly.
And do you think female politicians are more at risk?
Perhaps just by the virtue of being a woman. You know, I'm not as physically strong as a man. I do get horrible misogynistic, like, messages, but, you know, I take those with a grain of salt. But perhaps, you know, I think women are generally more vulnerable than men in real life.
And the beefed-up security that the party's providing for you, you're very grateful for?
Beyond grateful, you know, and it was immediate. It was proper. It was, we are going to take care of you for putting yourself out there for us. It was amazing.
Leila, thank you very much for joining us today and telling us about that. Thank you. It's pretty clear to me, listening to that, Reform politicians are furious, but they're also scared. And who can blame them, as Leila Cunningham has done, for beefing up her security? Because they feel that they're under attack. women in particular feel that they're vulnerable after what happened to Ann Widdecombe. Leila shared with me after the interview some of the messages she says she's had, pretty chilling. For example, one of them that she's reported to the police saying, "Now Ann has gone, you're next." Now, those messages are chilling for her, but they also have a chilling effect on democracy itself. Well, Helena and Ed are still here. There's just a story breaking on the iPaper saying that, as we were reporting the comment from Reform Party, saying Nigel Farage turned down taxpayer-funded security, including a bodyguard, car and trained driver, according to the iPaper. And he was offered the protection following police advice. Now, the party says they turned it down because it was inadequate. What do you make of that, Ed?
Well, I only know what the article says, and it says that they regard it as inadequate because he should have better security than Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition. The leader of the opposition traditionally gets a driver and some security. And I think I think Reform seems weirdly to be in the business of smearing the authorities. There is no question that Reform MPs are treated differently from other MPs. They're offered all the same level of security. And it now transpires, if that article is accurate, that Nigel Farage was offered exactly the kind of security I was talking about earlier. If there was a credible threat to his safety, he would have a trained police driver, that's no mean thing, and a bodyguard funded by the state. Now, if Nigel Farage knows better than the police what is the right level of security, so be it. But I suspect the Mayor of London has exactly the same level of security, as does Kemi Badenoch. They're both extremely high profile. I don't want to speculate, but I suspect they have their fair share of credible threats against them. So Reform should explain why they have turned down this, why they felt it was inadequate, and what they think would be adequate.
And they have, this is a report in the iPaper, we haven't substantiated it ourselves. Helena.
Well, I mean, Cathy, the awful thing is that I feel that we're witnessing Nigel Farage, playing a sort of mini me Trump, and he's diverting attention from the fact that he's been receiving huge sums of money from different people, and what the public don't seem to always know is that the reason for the rules is that the possibility that you owe the person who's given you large sums of money, what is it they want in return, is always there, and that's why you have to declare it. And he hasn't declared it, and he didn't, and I suggest that there's a question mark here because it's about cryptocurrency, which is one of those, it doesn't want to be regulated. He went to see the Bank of England's governor because he wants to make a stand against any kind of regulation. Well, that's what this is about.
OK, well, Nigel Farage says he has not done any wrongdoing as regards the £5 million gift. And I should say we did get in touch with the Speaker's office about those claims that Leila Cunningham made just there about letters from Reform MPs going unanswered. A spokeswoman said, "As you know, Mr Speaker's concern and focus on member security is a matter of record, but we don't comment on security issues or private correspondence." And ongoing reaction to this story will feature heavily on our late-night programme, The Wrap, tonight from 10 p.m. Joining Anna Botting to discuss all of today's big stories and the best of tomorrow's papers will be the Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine and Daily Mirror columnist Kevin Maguire. Lots more still to come.
I guess in this country it's good to quote the good old Churchill. If we don't fight for culture, what are we fighting for? And this we see also in Ukraine right now, that it is about everything is down to culture, who we are and why do we exist, what is our history, what is our future.
Well, with the PM in Paris for his final Coalition of the Willing summit to support Ukraine. A little earlier, I spoke to Dalia Stasevska, the Ukrainian conductor who's due to conduct the first night of the proms on Friday. Her Ukrainian mixtape album will be released to coincide with the proms, and I spoke to her a little earlier, not only about the proms, but the importance of culture with her country at war with Russia. Dalia!
Hello!
Where's your baton?
In my bag.
And the violin as well?
That's at home.
Yeah, mine too. It's a shame. We could have done duets. Would have been nice.
Next time, definitely.
But thank you so much for coming in and talking about this, because I'm a big, I was going to say I'm a big musician. I'm a big music fan, let's just say that. I enjoy classical music a lot, so it's great to have you on the sofa. Thank you.
So lovely to be here.
Thank you. Dalia Stasevska, you're conducting the first night of the Proms, a big honour, obviously, in such an exciting programme, including the Ravel Piano Concerto, played by the South Korean piano prodigy Yoon Chan Lim. I mean, he is a phenomenon, isn't he?
He is, and I've been really waiting to collaborate together with him, and this will be our first time, finally.
Yeah, and you've not rehearsed with him yet?
No, not yet, so a couple of days still.
And how will you approach that? Because he's got such a kind of reputation as this incredible prodigy, hasn't he?
Yes, well, basically it's the meeting like with any soloist or artist. We meet just two human beings and share some ideas, but the real kind of collaboration and getting to know each other happens on stage then when we start rehearsing, and we kind of look what we have to offer to the table and find, hopefully, a same note.
A meeting of musical minds.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's 7 years since you became the first female principal guest conductor of the BBC Symphony Orchestra. And I suppose now there's, female conductors like Maren Alsop, renowned the world over. Would you say women are storming the podium?
I hope so. I hope that our world is more equal. And this is, of course, a great thing to see, that there's a lot of different people being conductors and performers. So this is a great thing for everybody. But it definitely, the world has shifted into a better direction than it was, for example, 10 years ago.
Because the musical establishment used to be incredibly there was a lot of misogyny, wasn't there, towards female conductors in particular?
Well, yes. I was very lucky that I just finished the studies a couple of years before Me Too movement happened, and it was, of course, a very big revolution for equality, and it shifted also our industry into healthy, good direction when we realized that there's not enough of female representation. So I feel in a way lucky to just started my career during that time, because I think that I've got more opportunities than, for example, Maren Alsop, who started in her career in very different world. So, overall, I think it's something to celebrate, that we're really in a good direction.
And the BBC Proms is a sort of jewel in the crown, really, of the classical music sort of establishment, I guess, in this country. But there's such a struggle for resources in arts and culture. We've got a new Prime Minister coming in. What would be your message to him about the importance of things like the Proms, but much broader than that?
I guess in this country it's good to quote the good old Churchill. If we don't fight for culture, what are we fighting for? And this we see also in Ukraine right now, that it is about everything is down to culture, who we are and why do we exist, what is our history, what is our future. It's culture. It's not some business deals or something like that. It's something else that you cannot value in money, and that's why it's so precious that we just don't become some empty bowls of something, just figures or numbers. We are people who feel and want to tell story, want to leave a mark, and that's why it's so important to support culture, because it's our mirror of our nation.
Yeah, and you were born in Ukraine. You personally have delivered aid to Ukraine during the war. Do you feel very keenly that Russia, it's not merely about bombs and bullets, terrifying as that is, but it is also about the erasure of Ukrainian culture?
It's been always about erasing Ukrainian culture, because when you erase, there's no Ukraine left. You see that, for example, with the abduction of the children, and then they re-educate them to forget their country, their roots, and then it just becomes, when people don't know where they're from and who they are, you can control them. So that's why it's all about the culture, and has been for the past 350 years. And Ukrainians know that this time they have to win this war because it will be the end of Ukraine.
It's interesting, the first night of the proms has an American theme very heavily. I wonder if you feel that America is really on Ukraine's side now. We had the NATO summit last week. You know, Donald Trump has blown hot and cold on Ukraine. What do you feel now?
Well, it's a very complicated question. I think that regarding the proms, we rather wanted to celebrate America 250, but if you pay close attention, we are performing Fanfare for Common Man by Copeland, and it shows the heroism, or picturizes the heroism of an ordinary people. And what comes to Ukraine, the ordinary people have played such a big role in supporting Ukraine. If we remember, for example, the first months of the war, the full-scale war, politicians didn't want to help Ukraine. But what changed it? It was just the ordinary people who pressured the politicians to do more and to help Ukrainians. And that's why I would say that there is so much hope in just normal people. Everyone, me, just talking about Ukraine makes a huge difference. And I hope that we still continue to pressure politicians around the world to do more, because we could do more. And I find myself recently thinking a lot about myself in Ukrainian place. How would it feel 4 years into this war, and let's say we are in Kiev and they just killed ordinary sleeping people, 20 of them, in the night, and it doesn't make even the headlines anymore.
Yeah.
Why does it become so normal, and killing innocent people in the capital? And we're not even talking about the other regions that happens every day. How we would feel if we would be in their position.
You feel that very deeply?
I feel that really deeply, and that's why I want to encourage everybody that please don't forget Ukrainians. It's really, really important. And also something to remind that it's, of course, about Ukraine, but it's also about the future of the Europe, because we clearly feel and see that dictators around the world are waiting for the momentum to change the world order and to kind of rule the world on their own terms. And that's why it's so important that the Russia is stopped in Ukraine, and it will send the message as well that it's not okay to just come and grab and kill and be against all the rules that we have made, that this world would be a safer and better place for all of us and more democratic.
You know, you're sitting here in our Westminster studio. Do you worry that British politicians are forgetting Ukraine and the suffering of ordinary people night after night in Ukraine?
I'm immensely grateful, actually, for the support from Britain. I think that it's one of the most important partners for Ukraine. So in that sense, I wouldn't say no, because we've felt and seen the great support here. But it is in a bigger picture. I think that we should do more. One example, for example, we should be more active in closing loopholes in funding Russian war machine and making stronger sanctions. They are still not all used. And the other thing that I want to point out is that 4 years and we still haven't been able to close the Ukrainian skies. And who is paying for that? It's normal Ukrainians, not soldiers, the ordinary people. And this is something that I'm really sad about, that why can't we do more and more faster?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been great to hear from you, and good luck on the first night.
Thank you very much.
Well, Helena Kennedy and Ed Vaizey are still with me. Helena, of course, Keir Starmer is with the Coalition of the Willing in Paris tonight, but tomorrow he gets back and he's having a little leaving party. It's created a bit of a stir, hasn't it?
I heard, and the whispering in the House of Lords is unbelievable. Everyone's saying, were you invited? No, were you invited? I've not been invited. And I have to tell you, I've not been invited.
But you're one of his closest old friends.
I know, but you only have to say a little thing that gets up somebody's back and you're going to be struck off the list. But I won't have any sleepless nights over it.
Well, the question is whether he's got any political friends. That's always the speculation. But I won't get you to answer that. But, you know, before we go tonight, something for those who like a sweet treat like me. Sugar has been found in gas in space. Natural sugar found in raspberries has been detected in an enormous cloud of dust and gas close to the centre of the Milky Way galaxy. Disappointingly, though, this happened billions of years ago. Well, that's it for tonight. See you again tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'm going to tuck in. Ed, would you like one?
Oh, thank you so much.
I'll have one too, yeah, definitely.